I talked about the effacement of the line between established and newer democracies. Is there a single trend in the world that kind of captures this moment in history of where we are in terms of where domestic politics is going? If I were pressed to the wall and not recorded and put down on paper about this, I would describe it as, I think there is one. It's a bit incoherent still, I think, in the world, but I would describe it as following. You have a mix of a number of elements that are coming together. First, we have rising citizen expectations, which come from greater visibility of life across borders and greater citizen understanding of what's going on in different places. Mixed with technological tools which not only facilitate that understanding, but also facilitate organizations, both creating networks across borders, but also creating organizations within societies, formal and informal organizations, that makes organizing a lot easier. Third, you have rising inequality both within and among societies, which creates various kinds of pressures within those societies, and given higher citizen expectation, those pressures escalate. Fourth, you have many states, as I mentioned, that are post-authoritarian and no longer have very strong controls over the society, but are in a state of flux about that. And then fifth, you have the fact that political parties, 20 or 25 years into this international political trend, are still doing remarkably poorly. They're doing poorly in commanding respect, affection, or loyalty by their citizens, poorly in terms of defining ideological alternatives that people believe in. And so they're not proving to be in most societies very good vehicles for picking up this discontent and channeling. So the result of higher expectations, greater technological tools for information, for organizing, more states experiencing inequality in themselves with respect to their neighbors, less political control by states, and parties not being there to channel this means you have a lot of global protests. You have protests occurring across the world, and we see this whether it's Thailand, or Bosnia, Venezuela, so we can go around the world. There are a lot of protests, there are more than before. And the protests are somewhat encoded in many places. Sometimes they have a clear focus, sometimes they don't. And that's like a fever. And the patient is what I described as the patient reeling from these five underlying drivers of his or her condition. And the protests are a sign of the inability of states to grasp these problems and respond to them effectively. This could lead in two different directions. For some states, it's going to lead to continued conflict and breakdown, as happened in Syria. In other states, it will lead to a reformation of politics and an improvement, as I think as Brazil is trying to accomplish, although it's struggling too, to incorporate citizens effectively into the Brazilian sort of state-society relationship. And so most states are at a juncture of either going down a negative road or a positive road. And surprisingly, 25 years into this democratic trend, we're only there now, in many states facing that juncture. Let me just say a couple of quick words, and I'll close about the state of international democracy support. One thing more on the positive side and one on the negative side. On the positive side, I just wanted to emphasize that the world of international democracy support has continued to grow over the last 20, 25 years. And it's multiplied both in the number of organizations that are engaged, the variety of things that they do, but very importantly, where they come from, who they are. It's really getting to be quite a complex field, and there's an unfortunate tendency in Washington still to live in the bubble of thinking that A, the United States is sort of the most important actor in democracy support, and B, if you get together in the room 10 or 12 U.S. organizations, you have a significant part of the international democracy community. That's not the case. So you have European, I would include that Australian, Canadian organizations, which I won't go through them all, but of which there are many. Many are very well sort of funded, and many are very experienced and so forth. In addition, you have many multilateral organizations that are engaged in this field, and again, many, not just many parts of the United Nations, but regional organizations and so forth. Third, you have many private actors. If you have just a funders conference in Europe with private foundations engaged in human rights governance and democracy, there will be dozens, if not hundreds, of organizations in the room. So you have European, you have multilateral, you have public and private, and then in addition you have this emerging domain of non-Western democracies that are starting to get active in their regions and trying to support rights and democracy. So the Turkish government is a major provider of governance assistance in Africa. Brazil is trying to mediate the conflict in Venezuela. India is engaged in trying to help Sri Lanka move beyond its human rights afflictions. Japan has increased its emphasis on democracy promotion in its foreign policy. South Korea is trying to host a major international election assistance body, and so forth around the world. There's a growing range of efforts by these countries that's notable, interesting, and important. So my first point is that this field, despite this feeling that some have of democratic pause or recession, the field is surprisingly vivid and active out there. You feel this if you go to one country. Go to Tunisia now. You know, it's hard to take 3 steps to Tunisia without stepping over some international group, whether it's an Indian Electoral Commission or a Bulgarian, foreign ministry or a European Foundation or a USAID funded this or that, in any sector of Tunisian socio-political life that isn't there trying to help in some way. So the field is active. The second comment, though, that is related to that is there is this problem of pushback. I last month released a report on closing space for international democracy and rights support. Many governments around the world, somewhere more than 50, have taken active steps in the last 10 years to reduce the amount of space available for outsiders to come and try to do work supporting democracy and rights. They've done so legally by passing laws that make it difficult to give assistance to non-governmental actors. They've taken administrative steps short of laws. They've undertaken informal harassment for organizations, both domestically and international groups. They've expelled groups. They've threatened people. They've vilified people. They've withdrawn from organizations and so forth. And it's serious. It's a real phenomenon. It's not just Vladimir Putin and 2 or 3 other people who, have been very visible on this. It's much, much wider than people realize. It's also not just authoritarian or semi-authoritarian countries. We have the government of India that in 2010 passed a law making it more difficult for internationals to work. Indian organizations like Kenya almost passed a very restrictive NGO law last year. Nicaragua is doing this to some extent. There are a number of countries that are on the freedom category of democracies that are also engaged in this. And it's not just about the U.S. and about America's political baggage in the world. Sometimes it is, like the Bolivian government asked USAID to leave the country. That's a lot about history and America's political baggage in Bolivia. But there are a lot of other places when the Sri Lankan government asked the 2 main German political foundations to leave the country and says they're carrying out regime change activities. It's not about the United States. It's about something else. And so it's a broader problem. I think it's related to a deep fear, a double fear, a fear of civil society. Civil society has become much more threatening to most governments and political parties. Political parties rarely look like much of a threat, sort of just a bunch of old, stale opposition parties that meet in small rooms and are not very effective in communications, versus civil society groups that appear nimble, technologically savvy, appealing to young people, speaking an international language, so it's scary. And then secondly, the internationalization of civil society seems threatening to them. It seems unclear, sinister. They overestimate its importance to a great degree. They're not kidding when they think, that foreigners are directing revolutionaries in their countries and so forth. So it's a real fear. So this phenomenon, I don't think it's the end of international democracy and rights support by any means, but it is now part of the landscape in a way, in a bigger way than it was before. It's challenging this field to figure out how to respond to that. So my portrait of the international democracy and rights field is a mixed one, which is the field that's vivid and active. It's a good thing, but partly a consequence of that and these other changes that I'm talking about, the political situation in countries that are very nervous about global protest movements, the phenomenon of global protest is feeding this pushback wave. So that's my overview on both sides, but I look forward to hearing more about some regional focus and any questions and comments.
Tremendous. Excellent. Excellent tour d'horizon. And I think you've laid out a series of parameters for now, as you suggested, more regional ways. Steve,
Thank you. And I'd also like to express my thanks to CDACS and to Georgetown for inviting me to be part of this panel on the 10th anniversary. I arrived in Washington from New York in the summer of 2003 to take the position as the first director of CDACS at Georgetown. center for the third sector, we rapidly concluded it would be worthwhile to changing the name. And I think that has paid off. But anytime an institution hits a 10th anniversary, I think it is a real indicator of the extent to which it's become consolidated and institutionalized. And it is very, very gratifying after 10 years to see how far the program has come and to have this chance to take part in this panel. I don't know anyone who does better than Tom in laying out broad themes and synthesizing enormous amounts of information to provide a very, very clear sense of wide-ranging trends in a complex and multi-layered field like support for democratization and the challenges it confronts globally. I'm going to narrow the conversation in a couple of ways. I'm going to be narrowing the time frame a little bit from a period of 25 years to a shorter time frame, basically the last 3 or 4 years, and I'm going to be focusing on a particular region, the Middle East, where questions about democratization and the progress of efforts to bring about democratic change almost inevitably require that we think first and foremost about questions of authoritarian governments and the viability and capacity of authoritarian regimes to respond to the kinds of challenges posed by pressures to open up political systems and democratize. Before I jump in, though, I should note that this is also the calisthenics component of the afternoon. You are going to have to participate in some group exercise activities because I have a PowerPoint. I have some slides that I thought might be helpful in illustrating some of the broad trends that I wanted to talk about. But the slide screens are behind you. They are behind you. Okay. And what that means is that periodically you will need to shift in your seats in order to look at the screens behind you and then shift back. I have been reassured by some physical therapists that this kind of bobbing and twisting actually produces physiological gain. So please bear with me about this. I think that the logic for doing this is clear. We didn't want the screens right in front of the light, but it may make the conversation interesting. I won't take it personally if you turn your back on me from time to time. What I wanted to do was to use my time today to try and provide a broad sense of where we've come after 3 years of the Arab uprisings with respect to democratization, but through a focus on how the uprisings have affected governments in the Arab world and how, in particular, they've affected authoritarian governments, patterns of authoritarian governments in the Arab world. And I'm going to begin by giving some of the participants in the protests a chance to speak for themselves at the moment that those uprisings were initiated in early 2011. This quote, I think, conveys the sense of optimism about the democratic possibilities that emerged at the beginning of the uprising. And for those of us who work on the region, for those of us who argued for many, many years that these authoritarian regimes were adaptive, were resilient, had the capacity to absorb and resist pressures for democratic change, the transformations of 2011 posed a very significant challenge. They seemed to validate the work of people like Ian Lustig, like Jack Goldstone and others who had tended to think of these regimes as ossified, as brittle, as quite vulnerable to political shocks, certainly more so than scholars who had argued for the resilience and the adaptability of these systems of authoritarian rule. But as the protests continued and as we began to see some of this initial optimism fade, what we tended to get was a very different popular view of what was unfolding. And here is a quote from 2013 from a prominent Egyptian blogger about the state of the Egyptian revolution after 2.5 years of political protest and political change. And the idealism, all of that, he describes the optimism